like, so yeah, you're talking about systemic, problems within, throughout. Like, how does that? And of course, you're saying people rise to the top who are just like, they're just towing the line. They're just doing the job. They're just doing the job. They don't ask questions. Maybe they know right from wrong, but like I always used to think that, man, with education comes, with knowledge, with education comes a sense of decency, I guess. And not, of course, that's a blanket statement, but how like you being in it and seeing it from the inside, now on the outside, like how literally, man, and then we talk about defund the police, and we'll get to it, which is a term that I personally I don't like. It's and we'll get into that. But how, like, man, seriously, how can it change? You know what I'm saying? Like, we always talk about, like, man, well, there's not, obviously, like, in a lot of communities talking about, stop and frisk and this and that. Most of those cops don't live in those neighborhoods. You know what I'm saying? So they're not invested in anybody on the street, like any part of the community, so how does that change? And then on top of that, you're like you said, you stop and frisk a majority of these young black men, for instance, who could possibly be really good recruits for the job. But after a couple of times of that, man, like, why would they want to, go into law enforcement? Like, I know a few brothers who did, and I'm glad they did, but that is a small number, very small number. And then the amount of BS that they had to deal with once in it's amazing that they're still at it, Mm-hmm. But anyway, I'm sorry, it's a lot there, but I'm just always curious, man. Just like, we talk about the defund the police and all this kind of stuff, when I don't know if that's really getting to the root of the problem.
Yeah. So being from where you police is important, I think. I've also appreciated living in the next town over at times, because for me, at least as a chief, it was nice to have sort of a mental and emotional break. And because that helped my mental health, so I could return refreshed and rejuvenated. So I think looking at our recruit, like, who are we getting to come in? Are they people with degrees in psychology and sociology, and do they understand how the human mind works, and like the term defund the police is, so there's certain terms like toxic masculinity, white privilege, and defund the police that all land really badly on the very people that need to hear them most. So, and I always say this, I teach some classes and I'm like, those terms are horrible, but what they mean is not horrible. So, I don't know when it happened. I remember being taught about it at the police academy. There's a lawsuit because we used to do what's called warehousing people with mental illness. We would just stick them all in homes, and they didn't get to live amongst us. And at some point, someone was like, a lawyer, of course, or several, was like, you know what, that's not fair. It's an unconstitutional seizure of these people's, freedom. And so they sued, and sure enough, they won. And so they were, if you have mental illness, you are not necessarily, unless you're a threat to yourself or someone else, you can walk amongst us. What they didn't do is fund it. And so there's a lot of untreated mental illness walking around out there. And who do you call when somebody's acting in a way that's not like normal? You call the police. And we have poor training, and so we deal with it poorly. And so the defund the police is really calling for funding mental health and well-being and substance abuse issues.
That's what I was going to say about Al's question about defund the police and the name scaring people off, possibly misrepresenting it, is I think people are confused. I mean, if you're on the far, end of, no, we need more law and order, it's of course scary to you. And that's a deal breaker right there. If you're in the middle and you understand that there are things that need to be reformed, or, people need to be better qualified to handle different types of situations within the police department, traffic, drug issues, mental illness, domestic violence, they get confused of, well, wait, why would we take money out when really it's going to take an investment to specialize and train people? So I think that's where a lot of confusion happens.
Yeah. There had been a lot of so it depends who you're talking to about it. Like the people who came up with the idea probably understand the depth of it pretty well, but the people who are more militant about it, so I always say you can't fight oppression with oppression. And so, sometimes when you're dealing with folks who are early in on their social justice journey, they've got a lot of passion, but maybe not as much knowledge as they should have. And so they know the right things to say, but they don't know exactly why they're saying them sometimes. And so, and you get two people who are in that exact same journey on polar opposite ends. And that's not good. If you're like back the blue and then you're like defund the police, like those two folks probably shouldn't be in the same room together.
Right.
So it takes people who have some depth to be able to really deconstruct and have a good conversation about, what are things that we need to do to make a more fair and equitable society. And I talked a little earlier, like mental health and substance abuse, those are health issues, those are health crisis issues that we're saddling police departments to deal with, and they're ill-equipped to do it. But I think if we just copycat stuff and don't have some real intellects and some real groundbreakers, keep continuing to move the ball forward and make things better, just like music. I mean, you guys are, if you play the same thing over and over again, you get what you've always gotten, but if you have people who can think differently, be creative, and back it up with so here's the thing, backing it up with research and statistics and proving. So there's an organization in New York out of John Jay College called Center for Policing Equity, and they measure stuff. And they're like, we are going to statistically figure out what the problem is, and we're going to come up with ways to solve it, and we're going to measure it, and we're going to prove it. And if it works, we're going to do it again, and then we're going to measure it, and we're going to make it better. And I think that is woefully missing in my profession, or this profession, the profession I no longer partake in. But, I just don't think, if you're going to invest there. But stop throwing money at SWAT trucks and stuff. Give that money to healthcare providers, and fund people who are reaching out into those communities that are so underserved, and help them, deal with the health crises that they're having. Fund that, absolutely fund that. And at the end of the day, you might not need to pay as much money for police because you've gotten rid of half the problems that are there anyways. Defund the police doesn't sound great, because if you're worried about being burglarized or raped, you really don't want, half the amount of protection out there, but so it's really how you frame the problem and talk about it.